Good evening, all.
Tom, in case you don't know, our restrooms down there.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Just dancing around and somebody's all right, folks, we better get started.
Oh, yeah, I did see it already.
Good evening, all. All right, I'm going to just start. My name is Tom Ross, and welcome. Thank you all so much for taking time out of what I know are busy days. I really appreciate it. Tonight we're going to talk about some things going on in the city, strictly on the environmental side. This is a political discussion, so, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not giving advice, I'm telling you the laws. I'm telling you how regulations work and how they're applied in the world here. So I want you to understand that. I'm not doing it that way. A little bit about my background, and then we'll get into it. I'm an engineer, qualified engineer. I have a PE, I have a mechanical engineering degree from the University of Pittsburgh, a degree in chemistry. Also a master's degree from the University of Findlay in environmental management. And I've been working in the field, I don't know, I lost count, but at least 35 years. So I started from Marathon Oil Company, and I was compliance manager there, and handled all the things that we're going to talk about today. And I was fortunate enough to, in so many years, never have ever gotten a citation from EPA that I didn't beat, by the way, so that's important. I also have a small consulting firm, T. Ross Environmental Services, and again, this is the stuff we're going to talk about. So I've been doing it my whole life. Now, the education pedigree stuff, that's great. You can talk about that all day long. We had a person here the last time that started spouting that stuff off. In fact, the matter is, you can have law degrees, you can have 100 master's degrees and PhDs, but if you never worked in the real world, they're kind of not quite as valuable. Good people, but sitting at a desk is a lot different than cleaning up the spill and battling it out with EPA in court like I've done and having those discussions. So I want you to understand, everything I'm going to give you is the real world here, okay? All right. So today we're going to talk about some environmental stuff. Now, this is a very, very difficult subject to teach. Most of the time I have industry professionals in when I'm teaching it, and it takes 3 to 5 days just to teach what I'm going to try and spin into you in an hour. So we're going to be 50,000 feet. You've heard the saying 30,000 feet. We're going to be about 50,000. So I hope you're all right with that. So let's talk about a couple of things. I'm going to throw a bunch of acronyms around, and I didn't do as good a job at explaining the acronyms last time because a lot of people come on and say, what does that mean? So I'm going to try and take a few minutes to explain it. We're going to talk about something today called CERCLA. This is an EPA regulation that was passed in the 70s, and the reason it was passed is because we had a lot of environmental pollution going on in the country, as you probably know. Some of the folks in here may be old enough to remember Love Canal. You ever heard of that? Terrible, terrible situation. A lot of nasty stuff got into groundwater, caused all kinds of cancers in the entire neighborhood. Tons of cancers. Cuyahoga River, right here in Ohio, stimulated this act. It caught fire from all the paint manufacturers. Sherwin-Williams, as a matter of fact, big paint manufacturers dumping the stuff into the Cuyahoga River. So a diesel fuel spill. It sparked and caught fire and burned for 4 days. Started a whole environmental movement. One of the reasons this law was passed. It's called Comprehensive Emergency Response Cleanup Liabilities Act. You gotta love government acronyms, right? So what this does is it establishes liability. This is the most important piece of legislation in the history of the EPA, and one of the most important in the United States. Excuse me. I was at quarry all day at work, and so I'm covered in quarry dust, and I might tack up a lung here in a minute. Now, this is the most important part to remember. The liability established by CERCLA is some of the strongest liability in the country. You understand what I'm saying? There's about 10 acts that are out there, give or take. One of the ones is the Wartime Powers Act. This is in that category. This is how strong it is. And it goes like this. The act says this. It's joint, strict, several, and forever. Say that again. It's joint, strict, several, and forever. You're going to see why that's important in a minute to everybody in this room. Does everybody here live in Hancock County? Does anybody not? Okay, very good. Because you're on the hook, just so you know. You're about to find out how and why. Now, in order to understand CERCLA, we have to understand a couple of things. So here's what you have. Everything in the environmental business is broken down to this. This board moves, so I apologize for the print. Okay, material plus activity equals liability. Okay, material plus activity equals liability. What do I got? What am I doing with it? And am I liable for it? Now the hard part here is understanding the liability. So we're going to come back to that. But let's talk about the material first. So you say, that's great, Tom. There's all kinds of materials out there. You know the American Chemical Society registers 500,000 new chemicals every couple of years. There's over 10 million chemicals registered right now by the American Chemical Society. That's a lot of chemicals. How do you know which one's bad? Right? How do you know? Because there's so many out there. Everything you use could be bad. How do I know? Well, all those chemicals, many years ago, the EPA decided to target and figure out what chemicals are bad for the country. So they came up with a list under CERCLA. Technically, it was called the 313 list, and then it was amended under the Superfund Act. You ever heard of Superfund? Anybody?
Yeah.
Anybody still awake? Man, that was quick. You're already out. What did it take, about 5 minutes? It's a new record. Okay, Superfund is this. Every time you buy a gallon of gasoline, you pay a tax. That tax goes into this Superfund. So what it said was, with CERCLA, we have so many big polluters out there, and so many people we can't go after because those people no longer exist. These companies are out there, old steel mills, and paint manufacturers, and chrome plating operations. Chrome plating operations, one of the #1 things the EPA targets. And they said, there's nobody to go after. We've established this liability thing under CERCLA, and it says we can go after anybody we want that had anything to do with those companies, but if they don't exist, how do we clean it up? Superfund kicks in. There's a list called the National Priorities List. There's 1,200 sites on active all the time. Ohio has 100 right now in activity all the time. So it's important to note that. All right. So what CERCLA said was, all these chemicals are out there. Let's figure out which ones are the bad ones. So they did. But in the process of that, over history, more acts kept getting passed. So the next one was RCRA. Resource Conservation Recovery Act. RCRA is the Hazardous Waste Act. And I don't know if you realize this, but all waste, everything you throw away, all waste is regulated. It is. Even the stuff you throw in the municipal trash, it's regulated. Now I'll prove it to you. Can you throw a gallon of liquid paint in your trash can? What happens? Trash man kicks it back. Unless it's in a bag and you can't find it. It's not allowed to root through your trash. Fourth Amendment still applies. But you're not allowed. It's total liquid ban on landfills. This is important. And RCRA said you only have 2 types of landfills, a C and a D. This is hazardous. This is not. This is Hancock County landfill. This is where all the bad stuff has to go. Okay? And the streams never cross, ever, ever, ever. You can never cross those streams. You have RCRA and a whole list of hazardous waste. I'll just list them. You have TSCA, you have OSHA, you have DOT, the hazmat standard, FIFRA, there's a million of them. Man, they just keep going and going and going. Oh, Clean Air Act, that's a good one. Every one of them regulates something else. Clean Water Act. So this is the marine pollutants. They're called that. This is the hazardous air pollutants. They go up in the air. They're bad for the air. They're regulated. This is a federal Insecticide Fungicide Reclamation Act. Don't ask me about that. Although I don't like them spiders, so I'm glad they passed that one. Anyway, this is the DOT hazmat. When it goes over the road, it's regulated. There's a list of stuff, and it says these are regulated. OSHA. It's regulated, right? Everybody knows what OSHA is. Everybody has worked somewhere. OSHA has a list too. TSCA has a list. The Toxic Substances Chemical Act. There's only 6 of those. So why is this important? Everybody was trying to do different things. EPA put it all together into one list of lists. And now it's in 40. I didn't write this down the other day, but if you're having trouble sleeping and you want to sleep like a baby, you read this. 40 Codified Regulations, Section 300.2. That's the CERCLA list of lists, and it contains all the bad stuff. Why do I tell you this? Because all the stuff we're looking at, all the testing we've done to date, in the site downtown, every one of those chemicals is on this list. Every single one is regulated. Every single thing we found was on that list. I want to be clear on that. Anybody that tells you different is lying. Because I looked at the chemicals. We have the chemicals themselves. That means we have liability. Now, I'm going to explain that in a second. So we've talked about material. Do you understand where I'm coming from here? We've got a list of stuff. It's regulated. And by the way, we found it where we were looking. The few little spots we looked, we finally found it. All right. That's important. Let's talk about activity, though. You see, a drum of dimethyl gas sitting right here in the drum isn't hurting anything, right? Is it regulated? Well, probably under OSHA if somebody's handling it. You have those things. But if it doesn't get out of the container it's supposed to be in, it's not that big a deal. It's still bad. It's still on the list. But the activity dictates how it's regulated by one of these acts. That's the important part, okay? Now think about it like this. If it gets out of the container it's supposed to be in, that means it's spilled. Would you agree with me on this? I'm trying to keep you away because last time I did this, folks were like trying to take their life in the back corner there. I mean, it was bad. They were like, no, please, just take it out. You know? So, if it gets out of the container it's supposed to be in, it's spilled to the ground. Do you understand that? The reason these acts are in place, particularly CERCLA and RCRA, is because that disposal activity means it's now regulated. So the chemical's bad, but now it's really bad because it got out of the container it was supposed to be in, and it's spilled to the ground. And what are we trying to protect when we spill something to the ground? Does anybody know? Groundwater. That's right. Exactly. Great. You guys are doing better than the last group already. Oh, we had a couple repeats in here, but just so you know. Well, you did great. You just shared. It was one. Yeah. So keep that in mind. That is huge because, and now the liability is associated with the release. So understand this. If it gets out of the container it's supposed to be in, whether it's intentional or not, it doesn't matter. The regulations kick in. If it's on the list and it's out of that container, the regulations kick in. That's it. And CERCLA liability kicks in. And what does CERCLA liability say? If it gets out of the container it's supposed to be in and it's now on the ground. It says somebody's financially responsible for that cleanup, aren't they? And rightly so. It's jointly, in strict, in several, and forever you own it. So what does that mean? So let me give you an illustration. And I'll come back to that. I'll do that in a second. Let me just keep going. All right. CERCLA also covers something else. CERCLA covers, it's retroactive, so it's joint, strict, several, and forever. That's the key. That's the touch point for us. Now, here's how it works. If it gets out of the container it's supposed to be in, and it's on this list, it now becomes a waste. And you get a designation because it was on the list. And you become this. A generator. It's an EPA term. That means you generate hazardous waste. Do you understand that? You are required under the law to have an EPA ID number, a temporary one if it's a spill, which we now have. The city now has a temporary EPA ID number. You realize that, right? Because we have bad stuff down there. So you have a temporary one, or you're an ongoing industry with a permanent one, or it's a CERCLA Superfund site that's being cleaned up, and they apply for an EPA ID number that's tied to that site. Now, the EPA ID number under the generator clause is this. It's your social security number for waste. You own it forever. It's your social security number. It's an EPA ID number, and it follows that waste everywhere it goes. The transporter that picks it up to haul it off has to have an EPA ID number, but they put it on your manifest. It's yours forever. You own it. Do you understand that? I can't hammer that home enough. There's no out. This law has been settled since 72, 73. There's been 1,000 court cases. People trying to hide shell corporations. People trying to say, well, no, we're government employees. Bill Clinton fixed that, by the way. Bill Clinton passed the Federal Employees and City Governments Act. It says that the federal employees and city and government employees are now on the hook for the liability. So even government employees are now on the hook by law. In other words, it was for military sites. You know, military people dump a lot of stuff out. It's kind of bad. Okay. The law is settled. That's it. There's no getting out of it. There's no getting around it. There are a few things you can do that are less, a little less, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But once you become a generator, you own it. There was a term that came out, and it's not accurate. It's called cradle to grave. Have you ever heard that? in your travels maybe. Cradle to grave is the wrong implication because it implies that once the waste gets to a destination, that you no longer are responsible for it. That's not true. That is the biggest lie there is in the history of the Environmental Protection Agency. See, I told you this is boring and tough to listen to. So we're getting to the part where it applies to you. Give me a second. Okay. So, how do you become a generator? You generate hazardous waste, or ongoing, you have an industry, XYZ company, that's generating dimethyl death. That's regulated waste, and you have an EPA ID number. Or you purchase property without doing due diligence and setting up a fund or a consent decree that keeps the liability with the original owner or generator. The second you buy property that has anything on it, you are now the generator, and you are liable for any waste on that property. How long?
Forever.
Oh my gosh, you're awake. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. So once again, this stuff is settled. There's no around it. There's no getting out of it. There's no going around it. This was settled so long. I actually still had hair. That's how long ago it was. I'm not kidding. That's how long. I had hair. I had pictures. I know what you're thinking. There's no way this guy had hair, but I did. All kidding aside, though, this is serious business. Now, once you become a generator, you own the waste forever. I'll give you an example of how powerful right now RCRA liability is. So we're down at the site down here, downtown, and we get a drum out of hex chrome. You're familiar with hex chrome? We're going to come back to it and talk about how bad this stuff is in a second. But I want to illustrate this point because it's a good time to do it. As we take that drum out of the ground, we put it on a truck. That hauler has to have a hazmat certificate. They have to have an EPA ID number to even touch the stuff and take it down the road. You understand that, right? Okay. Let's say that hauler throws it on the truck, a bunch of our drums, and it's our stuff because we bought the property, sight unseen, or at least our elected officials did, sight unseen, and now we own it, and we put it on a truck to send it down the road to go to its final destination, which is called a TSDF, and I realize this is so much more than you need to know, but bear with me. It's a treatment, storage, disposal facility. It's a final resting place typically for waste. Okay? On the truck, let's say even the driver's drunk. Let's say the driver's drunk. Okay? Walking with me? Has an accident. Our stuff that is regulated hazardous waste with our name on it as the generator spills onto the ground. Spills in a waterway. Now there's a rule under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. It's called the mixture rule, and here's what it says. It says 1 drop of hazardous waste in 1 million gallons of water equals 1 million gallons of hazardous waste. It is all regulated. So the stuff and anything it touches, the second it gets out of the container it's supposed to be in, is regulated. So much so that there's an 800 number under CERCLA. It's made by the Coast Guard, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. If it's above one of the numbers in here, which isn't much, like a pound for hex chrome, a pound of hex chrome means you have to call the National Response Center, and everybody comes. Now, back to the scenario. Driver's drunk, stuff gets out of the container it's supposed to be in. Somebody has financial responsibility or environmental liability. Who? Who is responsible for the cleanup? You got it. You just got 5 days worth of stuff in 1 hour. There's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of things, but the generator is always 100% responsible. And I'll give you another example. I worked for Marathon for 25 years before I retired. We had a scenario out in Illinois at 10 drums that accidentally got shipped to a waste site that wasn't on our approved list, a TSDF. Those 10 drums were mixed in with about 800 or 900. It was a small mom and pop organization. It was a transfer site. Something happened there. It was a mistake, and the drums had liquid in them. I just want to be clear on that, not dirt. So they were waste oils and tank bottoms and stuff from a pipeline. Anyway, it was all regulated. It was hazardous waste. Got out of the container supposed to be in, along with a bunch of other drums. They got ruptured in a big collapse. Anyway, short for the story is, who do you think had to clean that up? Who do you think had to pay? Okay, here's the interesting thing. There were other companies that had stuff there. What's the liability? Joint, strict, several, and forever. So what does that mean? Joint means just you two clean it up up, even though they all have drums there. Strict is, all right, Diane, you're in. You own it all, and that's what happened to us. Marathon was strict. Liability, we cleaned it up. Several means you, and you, and you, and you, but not you, and not you. That's how the law works. It's not fair, it's not always right, but that's how it works. So you have to understand that liability. Does everybody understand that? Why we are now on the hook? So let's understand something else. Are elected officials, intentionally or not, purchased or accepted properties without doing due diligence? All the properties downtown, you understand that? All those properties are contaminated, or most of them are. We haven't delineated, which I'll show you in a second, the pollution yet. We haven't even actually delineated it to the umpteenth degree like the law says we're supposed to. So we don't even know how much liability we have. But since the city and the county took that ground, it's public ground. You realize that we all just became the generator, you and I, because the public ground is owned by who? So if it goes bad, who do you think is going to pay to clean it all up? Do you think elected officials are going to pay to clean that up? Well, we'll talk about their liability in a second. And the truth is probably not. Probably not. But remember, this liability is so strong, it can pierce the veil of qualified immunity. So elected officials are on the hook too. I just told you that with it.
So would Marathon, owning property in Findlay, they're also liable too, theoretically,
That's correct.
as a property owner, right?
They are. They're a business owner with property in Findlay. Every citizen in this community and in the county, because the county owns a bunch of the ground, is on the hook. At least the county would be on the hook for the county ground. Citizens are on the hook for all of it in Findlay because we're citizens of the county. So keep that in mind. That immunity is so strong under CERCLA that it will pierce your trust. So if you are become personally liable, let's say we have the lawsuit, of course there's always civil court on these things. You understand it going on for years. But an elected official could be on the hook by all means and intents and purposes, and their trust could easily be pierced. Easily. In fact, qualified immunity isn't even talked about in lawsuits where city governments fail to meet the requirements of the CERCLA and regular requirements. It's not even talked about. The court throws that out. Anybody that asks for it gets tossed. So you're on the hook. Now, does everybody understand that liability? I'm explaining it backwards. Last time I explained the chemicals first, but I wanted you to understand the liability first this time, and then we'll come back to it because we're kind of bringing it together. Now let's talk about the stuff that's down there. Unless somebody has a question, I can take care of it. Is anybody still awake? Raise your hand if you're not awake, right? Okay, how does this work now? All right, all the stuff on this list of lists, this giant list of bad things that are bad in the environment for us. Of those, every single thing we found down on the site is on these lists. So what we have, I didn't draw this last time, let's just do it in a square. So if you get property, you suddenly decide, oh my gosh, I got to clean it up now. We got to figure out what to do. The law is very prescriptive on this, and even your consultants will tell you very clearly that you need to approach it in an organized manner. We didn't do that. We tore down a building that weren't even supposed to tear down, that was hazardous waste. We did a bunch of other things in an unorganized and unplanned manner. What we said was, or what the project manager said, whose name is Steve Wilson, we'll just clean it up as we find it. You're not allowed to do that. This site is considered a surplus site because it had bad stuff in it. Once we found the bad stuff, everything stopped and we had to change gears. Okay, so when you do it, you set up a grid pattern of sampling. You do something called a phase 1 site assessment. And you look down there and you say, what could be down there? Based on historical stuff. And oh, wait, there's a chrome plating operation right here. Let's see what it is. That's chrome, so we know we need a sample there. We also said, oh, wait a minute. There was a dry cleaning assembly on the front up by Clinton Court. Okay, that's trichloroethene and trichloroethane. And oh, wait a second. And even though they didn't recognize this until I brought it to their attention, somewhere about here was a guy that was operating a transfer station, whose name I'm not going to say out loud, it's not fair. But he was operating a transfer station, and he was taking hazardous waste in and transferring it to a TSDF up in Michigan. It's called Laidlaw. It's an old safety clean site. During the 2007 flood, it was about 800 drums in there. They spilled all over this area. They flooded this entire area. And the drums ruptured and spilled everywhere. Marathon responded to them. Because we have a mutual aid agreement with the city of Findlay in case there's a flood or something like that. I was down there. We were wading in up to here in waders trying to find drums. Trying to find the drums with sticks. So that stuff spilled everywhere. That was all organics. So that's why you find not just all the metals associated with it, but you find benzene and toluene and ethylbenzene and dodecylbenzoylsulfonic acid and about 100 other things that people can't pronounce or don't know what's bad for them. So let's talk about what's bad for you. Let's start with hexchrome. One of the nastiest things on the planet, one of the most heavily regulated chemicals there is. And what does it do? If hexchrome gets into your system, it's a forever chemical. It never leaves your body. You see, metals can either be created or destroyed. You have to understand that. You can't make them and you can't destroy them. You can mal them, you can melt them, and you can put them together with other metals, but you can't make them. And they go in your body and they stay forever. Hexchrome has a terrible and nasty affinity of being a teratogenic and a mutagenic. I don't know if you're familiar with those terms, but ladies, you ought to be paying close attention because if it gets into your body, you're a woman of childbearing age, it affects the fetus. And it alters that genome. It'll cause a birth defect immediately in an already pregnant woman, or it'll modify the egg, the genome, in a woman's reproductive system. And that egg, if it comes to term, will pass on that genetic flaw. That genome is changed forever, for every generation, forever. Forever. That's how bad this stuff is. They want to clean it up to what's called the VAP standard. If this is clean, this is that. Background is 1 to 3 parts per million on hexchrome. They're going to clean it up to 10, 15, 20. How they find it. So they're going to leave it in the ground. They're going to leave it. They're not going to clean it up. What else is down there? Benzene. Loaded with benzene, particularly over here in this area. And by the way, we told them there were underground storage tanks there. CEC or Stantec, whoever did the due diligence, or the phase 2, which we forced them to actually, you better thank that magnificent woman sitting in the back corner right there. She's the one that forced them to do it. They weren't going to do anything. That and Jim Stashak. They weren't going to do anything. Thank you, Holly Frishy, by the way. God bless you for looking out for our people. They weren't going to do it. They just wanted to plow forward and build a monument. And I understand. I understand we need flood mitigation. We do. And this part is all flood mitigation. Of course, above Clinton Court is the development. You know that. 300 low-income housing units. They're building right here. Low-income housing. Apparently, low-income housing, we don't care if children play in hexchrome. No big deal, right? I don't know. Guess y'all look at it like that, too, and ask some questions. Of course, they'll deny that, but we have the drawings and all the maps clear back from when Tony Reed was trying to push it. So anyway, they want to clean it up to the VAP standard. Now, the Voluntary Action Program is the VAP standard. By the way, it's a great program. I love that program from an industrial side. It's wonderful. We've cleaned up 100 sites over the years with it. It's great because you clean it up to a level where you can build more industrial stuff on there. Man, you look like you're ready to chuck a rocket, man. Are you all right? You don't look happy.
Who, me?
Yeah, you look like you're going to throw a rock at me.
No, I'm
How many rocks do you?
I'm just trying to absorb all
You
that.
check her for rocks somebody? No. I know it's a lot. I'm just picking on you, man. Because you look like a nice lady. So keep that in mind. The Voluntary Action Program, great program. It's great. You got an old steel mill over in Pittsburgh. We use this stuff. That in Brownfield. We use them extensively. Youngstown, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. There's all these industrial properties blighted. And now we've got them to a CERCLA, either in the CERCLA fund or investors will buy them. And they'll cut a deal with EPA and say, hey, we're going to clean it up. We're going to put another steel mill on it. EPA says, man, that's fantastic. That's jobs. You're going to clean it up to a certain level. So we clean it up to here. All the bad stuff, we clean it up to a certain level, enough to build a steel mill on it. It's a great program, but it's misapplied here. This is where children are going to play. We need to clean this up right. We need to do the right thing. We need to spend the money and clean this up the right way. Because there's other stuff in there. I'm touching on the base. So there's selenium, there's cadmium, there's chromium, there's hexchrome. There's all the RCRA metals in there. Every single one of them settles either in your bone marrow or your blood tissue. Benzene causes leukemia. in your body. Did you know that? It's called a refiner's disease because you breathe benzene all the time working in a refinery. It causes leukemia after repeated exposure. So these things are out there and they need cleaned up. They need to do the right thing. They want to spend 8 or 10 million on a bridge. By the way, look, I saw the renderings, the big mushroom thing looked kind of interesting. I don't know. I don't care about that side of it. I really don't. If that's what you're going to do, let the people vote on it. If people vote for that, if it gets on the ballot, that's great. But clean it up. You've got to do the moral and ethical and responsible thing. And here's why. They're going to get sued. But we're going to get sued. Because it's a latent effect even. Some of this stuff takes 10, 15 years if you're exposed to it to metastasize in your body. So suddenly, 15 years from now, it shows up. They sue the city. Those elected officials, God willing, are probably off living their life in Florida, having a great time, I would hope. I'm sure you don't want to stay here forever. Your wife doesn't want to stay here forever. So the reality is, it's going to be the next generation that's going to get hammered with it. You're going to get sued. So you have a couple of options. What do you do? What do I do, Tom? I don't understand it. I don't have any power. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Call your councilman. Council person. Forgive me, council ladies. Call your council person. Call US EPA. That's the 800 number right there. 800-621-8431. Call them. That's the federal EPA. Those people are in charge of the ones in PG. That's Ohio EPA. Bowling Green office. 419-352-8461. Tell them I need to talk to the Solid and Hazardous Waste Division. And say, I don't know what's going on, but they got hexchrome. And some guy who's short and ugly and had bad breath, that's why I sat in the back row, wouldn't shut up about hexchrome. You mention hexchrome, you're going to get some attention. Other thing you can do, which is one of the most important things, we have a petition right now to get it on the ballot, whether or not to move forward with it. Sign the petition. It's in the back of the room. If you haven't signed it yet, and you live in the city limits, you have to live in the city limits because it's a city initiative. Sign it. All you're doing is saying, look, we just want to vote. Right now they're driving forward. Now that's sort of a political side. I told you I'm going to stay out of that, but we have a wonderful process to do it. Call your councilman. Call EPA. Talk to them. Ask them, why aren't you doing anything? Because this stuff has been reported. So there's a building down there. There's an old chrome plating building. The old brick building. By very definition, chrome plating operations are regulated under CERCLA. They're regulated. Everything that comes out of a chrome plating building is regulated under CERCLA unless it's municipal trash. So when the building was torn down, it was torn down without getting a permit. And guess where that stuff went? Guess.
Landfill.
Went to a subtitle D landfill, which means, what did I tell you about the mixture rule? The stuff and everything the stuff touches is now what? Hazardous waste. So what did they do? They just put the entire county on the hook for cleanup of a landfill, potentially. Potentially, and we can prove it, by the way, because they had to fill out a bill of lading to bring it in there. They didn't put it on a manifest. They just did a bill of lading charge. Charge them to bring it in. You don't just keep the dump in the landfill for nothing. I don't know if you've been out there, but those people are pretty serious about how a landfill works.
So was it to save money? Was that just to save money? Is that why they didn't do it the proper way?
It's a good question, Matthias. I don't know why they wouldn't have done it, but I do know this. I went to council and spoke about it. And it wasn't, and Holly Frishy brought it to light, and I know Jim Stasiak did, and I can't remember if any of the other council people did. Forgive me if one of your friends is a council person and I'm missing it. I don't remember. They may have. But we put enough pressure on them to get them to stop that. And what they do, then they came back and brought in King Environmental, who is a qualified cleanup contractor with a US EPA ID number, and all their employees are trained under the OSHA 40 hour. Did you know that to touch anything on this list, you have to have 40 hours of training under the Occupational Safety and Health Standard, and it has to be renewed every year for 8 hours. I'm pretty sure a lot of those people didn't have that training, so they weren't told, hey, you're breathing hexavalent chrome dust. Because they blew a plume downtown. I saw it. I have a video of it. I called US EPA about it and sent them the video, and unfortunately nothing happened, but we do have video of it.
Was that City of Findlay workers who did that?
I'm not 100% sure. It might have been county workers. I don't know.
Okay.
But I know there were some city people down there, or there were some government people down.
They should all want to know about that they were
Well-
all poisoned like that by their own employer, the city or the county.
Well, one of the pieces that comes out, that fleshes out, is something called Title III, and I put it up here somewhere. And it was under the Superfund Reauthorization Act. It was called Title III. And what it said was this: it was the Community Right to Know Act. So EPA passed this act that said all kinds of stuff is happening around you, and you don't know anything about it. You have dimethyl death in this factory right here, and you deserve it as a private citizen, no matter unless it's trade secret. So, for example, we had the old RCA out there, which then became Harris. You remember that place? Loaded with everything you could think of. It was a semiconductor plant. Title III says that you have to file as an industry or as a waste generator with the community, the on-site coordinator, and I think it's still a fire marshal in Hancock County, and tell them everything that you have. You have to list it. Here's how much I have, here's what I have, and here's how much we keep on site, including when you're doing remediation projects. It's within a 1 mile circle. There's a button that goes there. And I'm pretty sure they didn't go door to door and let everybody know in a 1 mile circle that they were potentially subject to hexavalent chrome dust flying through the air. Yes.
I'm not asking you to speak for the city. One of the things that has troubled me about this from the beginning is whether they mediate to VAP standard or residential. Why in the world is there not a fence around that property?
Well, there was for many years. They
It's
tore the
open
fence
to
down.
the public.
Well, there's an EPA ID number posted on there. Remember, let's back. Your point is, your question is exceptionally good. You're paying attention. I appreciate that. This is a boring subject. I get it. So when they tore down the building, they first tore down the brick structure. They sent it to this landfill. But then we caught them, and everybody screamed and cried and yelled and said, "You didn't delineate. We got chemicals down there." And again, there she is. We're going to give her a hug. She stopped them. She did it with her and Jim Station. I did too. Kept saying there's nobody fiscally responsible. So they stopped them, and then they brought in a company called King Environmental. King dug a hole out. First they dug the pad out. Unfortunately, the pad sat for about 2 years, covered in hex chrome dust. And where do you think that dust went every time it rained? What's right here?
Drinking water.
So all of that stuff, all those metals have an interesting affinity as well. You may find this fascinating. This is how boring I am at parties. You can only imagine my poor wife. When I talk about it, I'm like, well, guess what? Let's talk about that hexavalent chrome. Metals, all those metals I listed, they're all there, all the Ricker metals. They have a natural affinity. If they get in the water source, they stay in the aquifer, just like they stay in your body. But if they get in a river or an area where it has access to aquatic life, plants pick it up. Plants have a natural affinity to pick it up. Do you ever notice on tobacco, you ever read, wow, this has arsenic. Arsenic's a metal, and it's down there too, by the way. Arsenic, selenium, all these bad metals. It's just, you're exposed to all these metals. How the heck is that possible? It's a tobacco plant. Tobacco plants pick up metals. Plants pick up metals. They have a natural affinity to pick it up, and then they get in the deciduous material of plants. And what happens? Small animals eat plants, right? So you got 100 small animals eating. Then the next size predator eats 100 of the animals, and it concentrates up all the way to the apex predator. So what happens is the apex predator, that's why you can't eat walleye all the time, because of the coal-fired power plants around the lake. They blow coal, lets emits mercury when you burn it, because you can't either create or destroy a metal. It goes up in the air, it drops down, and gets into plant life. Who's the apex predator? Walleye. So they eat it, and it concentrates up because it never leaves your tissue. You ingest it, it's done. You're in your body forever. And in particular, in this case, although mercury is also a mutagenic for the fetal system, but it's also a CNS activator. It means central nervous system. You ever hear of Mad Hatter disease? They used to treat beaver pelts with mercury to preserve them. Mad Hatters, they go nuts. They breathe the fumes, because you can breathe it in too. They breathe the fumes, and it drove them crazy. Terrible. It's a CNS activator. So all these things down here are all around this area. So we're going to bench this, right? We're going to come up this way, and we're going to and they say, well, we're going to remove as little as possible so we can bench it. It's, again, we need flood mitigation, man. We need it bad. I lost a house in 2007. I'm sure a lot of other people in this room have been affected. We need it. But we need to do it right. And if you think for 1 second that hydrology doesn't push and ebb and flow those materials, particularly the ones that stay in the water table, you're fooling yourself. They move back back and forth. So they were talking about putting a mesh screen, a cap. I said, well, now, no, it doesn't do anything. All it does is hold the soil in place. It's a soil compaction method. It just holds the clay base in place and the topsoil on top of it, so when it floods, it won't wash the benching project like that. It doesn't do anything for environmental control. Nothing. Zero. Zip. So all these areas that they told us weren't contaminated, and we forced them to do a phase 2 on out of shaming them. And then we did spot phase 2s. And they found all kinds of stuff just doing spot work. They haven't delineated the entire site, because here's what it looks like. This is called a plume. So all the way around this area, a plume will push, ebb and flow with hydraulic groundwater pressure. It moves. Hexavalent chrome, benzene, toluene, these things will all stay in the aquifer. And they'll move. They'll come and they'll go. And they'll migrate back and forth. And they say, well, all right, we'll just clean it up the bedrock. Well, that's not going to help either. Bedrock contains something called karst formations. Has anybody ever heard this term?
Nope.
That's how you get, anybody live on a farm and have a well? Anybody have a well?
I
Okay,
do.
how do you think you get drinking water
Not
when you...
anymore, I've been here.
Well, okay. Fair enough. But, all right, let's say you have a well. You ask yourself, well, if 90% of Hancock County sits on bedrock at about 3 to 10 feet, how do you drill a hole and get water? Because you're in stone. Well, that's the thing. Stone has karst formations in it and allows groundwater to move through it dramatically well. In fact, it cleans it as it does that. If you're out in the country, you get good water. You say it's hard, but it's good for you. It's good for your body. So that karst formation is going to pick up all of those pollutants as well. It's going to be in the bedrock. It's going to be everywhere. It will ebb and flow and move with hydraulic ground pressure. And there's indisputable science. Lawsuits since back when I had hair, 73. I'm not even sure I had hair in 73. That's a good question. But you feel my pain, don't you, brother? Right on. So to sum this up, okay, let's just put, I know this is boring, I'm sorry, but let's put this in perspective. We stupidly we picked up liability on some properties. We made a mistake. And by we, I mean our elected officials made a huge error, whether it was arrogance, hubris, or just naivete. I have no idea. I don't care, because we're already stuck with it. There's nothing we can do. Nobody's ever going to buy it. I'm in the right mind because we already got some samples that said it's bad. So we're stuck with it. The county has some ground which they cannot wait to dish off onto the city. Why would they do that? Anybody have any ideas?
Liability.
Forever.
They want to dump the liability to us because they've been listening to dummies like me out there go, well, you might have a problem here, All of a sudden, they're waking up, and the county commissioners can't wait to dump some of this property to us for logical reasons. They want rid of the liability. They're obligated to clean up $850,000 worth of benching. They're obligated to do that, and they're going to do that. They're not going to clean it up. They don't have any more money. They're not going to clean it up any more than that. That's what they've said publicly. How much would it take to clean this entire site up and do it correctly? I say $2.5 to $3 million in my education. I've done this for years. $2.5 to $3 million, clean it up, and we'd be done. And hold that thought. And all liability then would be gone. Now, under the VAP standard, all the chemicals are going to stay there except the stuff in the top 2 feet. It's all going to be there into perpetuity. And how long do we have liability for all the stuff that's there? Forever, right? So you ask yourself, the difference between $800,000 and $3 million is nothing on a $500 million project. Clean it up, yes.
So what does the $3 million get us? How much dirt do you take out? Does it cover the whole 19 acres?
Yes. So what it does is it gets you delineation first. You punch a bunch of holes and you find out where the pollution is. That's why we do sampling. You don't spot sample. We think it might be there because remember, I told you, we told them there were underground storage tanks here. They said, no, there's not. I have an email from Steve Wilson. I'm like, you have underground storage tanks over there. You need to pay attention. Well, you don't have any underground. What they did, they found 2 underground storage tanks loaded with crap. Lead, tetramethyl lead. Remember old cars? Remember the old Chevys? You had to put leaded gasoline in, right? Because it lubricated the valve. That's where it come from. A little gas station. Everybody knew it was there. They were just not doing their job. So we're stuck with that. So yes.
Okay, so is the solution to this problem, if we don't do a $3 million cleanup, we put some kind of a commercial facility on that and forget about the park? I mean, because in a commercial set, you said we didn't have to clean to quite the same.
No, we wouldn't have to clean. We'd clean to a VAP standard or a brownfield
Yeah.
standard, because they're using brownfield monies.
Right.
And brownfield comes with a certain amount of quid pro quos. Okay, you're gonna take our money, you have to clean it up to at least this level. And that's negotiable, yes.
I believe almost all those properties were bought with FEMA dollars, and they all have restrictions where they cannot build anything. Like, they can't sell it and have someone build a factory there, I don't think.
That, you may be
I
right
think they
on
have,
facts, I'm
they
not
have
sure.
specific restrictions that,
Okay.
you know, maybe a park,
Well,
but
here's the
it's
bottom
very
line.
limited what they can do there.
Well, and to your point, this is for flood mitigation. We need it. We need the benching project anyway. If you put buildings on it, you displace the water. So it's almost like you shoot, darned if you do, darned if you don't, I guess. I'm not sure how to portray that, but you understand what I'm saying? We really need the flood mitigation. We need that more than anything. We need it. Man, we need it so bad. We screwed up though. We put the cart before the horse. We got in a hurry. But these are our elected officials, so it's we the people. We need to accept that. And we need to hold our elected officials accountable for that. You need to say, you need to stop doing what you're doing, and let's clean it up right. How hard is that? Why can't we all just come together as a community and say, this is what's best for Findlay, Ohio? Because they're so bitter and angry at anybody that speaks up that they hate the messenger. If I went in there and told them everything I told you, they'd poo-poo it. In fact, they sent their attorney in who wrote the letter. Again, I'm not going to say his name because he's a nice guy. Well, you said it. I did. I want to be on record as I didn't point that out. But when we specifically asked the gentleman, said, well, since you are so confident in the VAP standard that no one will ever get hurt again, how about you sign an indemnification letter, you and the mayor and city council, that says, if anything happens, we will assume the liability, not the city. Well, I'm not doing that. He got all mad and angry, and you can watch the video. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it wasn't nice. I don't think he cussed, that's not his nature, but he was not happy. So what's that tell you? It tells you everything you need to know. They know there's liability there, they're just not spending the money to clean it up because they'd rather build a bridge or something. I don't know what they want to do, I don't know. I don't go to those meetings, so yes.
You mentioned benching, so we know that benching has to happen. Can benching happen without the park? Can
Of
they do
course,
that?
just this nice green space, or build yeah, it could happen without the park, absolutely, yeah.
I don't understand why people think we have to have concrete or pave it, you know, like, we could plant trees there. Like, we could, if anybody's ever been to Toledo, they have something called the Metro Parks.
Oh, yeah,
And when you
nice.
get to
Yeah.
a Metro Park,
Nice.
you're in the middle of Toledo, but you feel like you're way out at Riverbend. But you are in the middle of town. And so I don't understand why everybody's so, you know, like, we gotta have concrete as far as the eye can see, and it's gotta be as hot as could be. And I'm like, my goodness, let's plant some trees. You know, you can have a walking path that goes through there. We don't have to build stuff.
But wasn't the stuff the purpose of, it would accommodate flooding so it'd be easier to clean up? Because if it's all ground and you got trees, then isn't that ground then contaminated with the flood water?
Well,
I mean, I like that idea.
Not if it's cleaned up.
Yeah, if
We don't
it's
have to,
cleaned up.
if it's cleaned to a residential standard,
Yeah,
we don't have to
it's
worry
so
about
good.
flooding or anything for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, all the liability goes away. So under the VAP standard, they're again, not lying, but they're not being 100% truthful. They're saying under the VAP standard, well, we're going to get a release from EPA under the VAP standard, which is the Voluntary Action Program. We don't have any liability. Well, that's a lie. The VAP standard only alleviates you for liability with EPA. In other words, you don't get cited, you don't get a fine, which is 10 years in prison. 10 years in prison, $250,000 per day per violation. Just so you know, circle don't play. That VAP standard, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. The VAP standard does not give you what's called a no further action because there's no citation. Under the law, in order to get an NFA letter, you have to have an original citation. We don't have anybody's cite. All you'll get from EPA is a letter that says, yeah, you cleaned it to here. Great job. That's it. Under cleanup, under CERCLA, the background, you're going to get an NFA from EPA that exonerates you from liability all in the future. So you can say you cleaned it up so we finish this flood. You cleaned it up to background standards, you're done. You're out. Do whatever you want with it. Go have fun, please. Develop it. But here's the worst part now. They used taxpayer money to buy all of it. All of it was bought with taxpayer money. You understand that? Rather than let developers go in and clean it up, which is what they should have done, especially over here on this side, because they're going to build 300 low-income housing units. I keep hammering that home. Rather than that, they put it all on the taxpayer. They put it all on the citizens, rather than letting the developer go in, because the developer would have had to clean it up completely. We wouldn't have had this option.
Well-
So you had, I'm sorry, Matthias.
Oh, yeah,
you had
go
a
ahead.
question. Go ahead.
Have they not stated numerous times that the VAP standard would result in a no further action letter?
Yeah, you won't get that. The NFA they're talking about is you cleaned it up to VAP. That's all it is. It doesn't mean no further action. It's just a letter that says, yeah, you cleaned it up to this standard. Great job. EPA will be grateful for that. They'll pay you that and say, yeah, but it's not clean. You never get clean. That's the term. Relieved from liability. The material's bad. The activity is a spill. We're the generator. We have the liability. If you want out of it, clean it up. You as a private citizen, you're on the hook just like me. We're on the hook as a community.
Do you realize that this is almost like a sinkhole? If you come in from any direction into Findlay, it is a hole.
Yes,
It
you're
is.
looking downhill no matter where you're coming from,
Like
yes.
a toilet bowl. I mean, it's a bowl.
Terrible.
Everything comes in.
Full heart, what do you think, man?
I looked for houses years ago. I was on 19th Street and I went up to the second floor of the house. I was eye level with John Hancock.
Oh, yeah, well,
And
North-
you don't realize
North
this is
Findlay
a valley, and it's a round valley. It's, everything's coming in from every direction. The water is contaminated.
You mean it comes into us? Well, you're talking about farm runoff. It's
No,
different.
no, I'm talking about this toxic stuff
Oh,
has
okay.
been here, and
It
I
has been here a long time.
I
It
have
has.
relatives that grew up here.
You know, it is entirely possible, not to interrupt you,
And
forgive me,
they
but
died.
it is entirely possible that historical contamination, there could have been some latent illnesses. There is absolutely possible with the stuff that's in there. The chrome plating operation shut down in the 80s. That stuff's been sitting there, and they found, when they excavated the hole, they sampled it 7 times. 6 of them, it was about 20,000 parts per million,
Wow.
which is so high that if you had it on you. And then the last one, they had 0. Well, it was below the action limit, and then they stopped. Instead of letting it continue, then they just threw dirt in the hole, filled the hole in, because that's what they were told to do. They should have continued to pump and treat and pump and treat and pump and treat for 6 months until they got zeros.
We've had 3 floods since then, too, you know?
So am I wrong then? Because I was always under the assumption that when the river flooded, we had contamination and bad things that flowed across our streets and our.
I'm sure you got raw sewage.
Right.
Your raw
So
sewage, your
if you-
CSOs overflow, that's covered in.
Well, so that's my point,
Regulates
is that if
stuff.
we clean it up and then we put a green space in there and it floods, then don't we now have contamination again?
Well, we can't control what comes down the river to us, but we sure can control what's in there. We have the ability to do the right thing. We have the ability to morally and ethically clean it up and get 0 contamination out of there, and then build a nice park. If you want to build a park after that, could care less.
I think what you're talking about is like after it flooded and that park on Emory Adams, they had to clean it. That's because of the fecal matter that is in the floodwaters. So that's why they have to clean
Sewers
it.
overflow, they're called
Just-
CSOs.
Yeah, the raw
Right,
sewage.
right.
It's not because of, I mean, we didn't have to clean the whole town because of that
No, but I'm saying though,
side.
is wouldn't that same fecal matter and water get onto the park that you talked about, which I
Yeah,
liked
yes.
your idea, but it's just brown now.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
gonna
So
contaminate
you
that.
only have to clean certain things, like they have to clean wood, they have to clean certain things that it can actually absorb
Right,
contaminants.
I just
after
wanted to
flood.
understand where.
Well,
they
keep in
came
mind,
from.
if they plant trees at that park, those trees, because of the taproot, are going to go right through that plastic membrane, they're going to pick up that metal. If they ever cut down one of those trees, legally, by definition, they have to test it. If it clips, it says fails a TCLP, that's the test. for hexachrome, it's hazardous waste treat. We do it without, there's another treatment, there's a chrome plating operation on Blanchard on the S curve there. You ever notice that in the back there? You know what we do? We plant goldenrod there every year. Goldenrod is a tremendous affinity for picking up chrome because it's hot. The whole spot's hot. We harvest it every year. We have an EPA ID number. We harvest it every year. We take all of it and drum it, take it off as hazardous
Hey.
waste.
Solution.
It's taken
Tobacco.
The people who lived there died.
years now, and it's still, it's still picking it up.
The
So.
people who used to live there, like their teeth fell out and their health went downhill and they died because they lived right beside that toxic site. What you're talking about?
You're
It's right
talking
where
the one on
Crystal,
Blanchard?
where
I don't
Crystal
know about
Avenue and Blanchard. You know the S turn in Blanchard, and there was a there was a mobile home park there.
Yeah, there was a mobile home park right in the middle of it.
Yeah,
In fact,
and
there
on
was a
Crystal
water
Avenue
park.
there was like a carryout or a gas station on Crystal Avenue where Laquinio runs into Crystal, and the people who lived in that building, like their teeth fell out, their health went downhill because they lived so close to that toxic site. It's there right now. They just have a chain link fence around it.
Yeah, they're still cleaning it up. It's been 22 years, they've been there, 24 years. Has an EPA ID number. It's a restricted site, as well it should be, because the law says if you're a generator, you have to restrict access to the waste. You have to control the waste at all times. You have to not allow the public to be in contact with it. Many of the people that are in contact with it, the OSHA 40-hour training under the HAZWalker standard. That's the law. It's a cleanup site. That's the law. They're trying to treat it as we'll clean it up as we find it. It's not how the law works. The law says you need to delineate the pollution and figure out what you're dealing with before you ever dig any dirt. And they didn't do that. They just went in head first, and they knew, and please don't forgive me, please, this law has been on the books since '73. Everybody knows about that. Everybody that at least does, is particularly a manager of a landfill, Steve Wilson. He knows that, and everybody knows that's hexavalent chrome down there. Everybody knew that. Everybody, because Bob Nichols, a former councilman, donated that site to the city. Why? Because he didn't want his heirs to be
Have to clean
bankrupt, because they can go after your heirs on a cleanup. So his partner and he donated, his partner I think passed away. Bob passed away since too. By the way, very nice man. We gotta give him credit. That was shrewd, and the city was dumb enough to take it sight unseen. Sight unseen. So I want you to think about that. Somebody gave that to the city and handed them the most liability they ever had.
So typically developers would, if they thought there was a chance that a property they're gonna buy had some kind of contaminants, they would do that kind of research before they buy it,
Yeah, they
right?
do a phase one first. Phase one means you go and look at all the historical records of everything in the area. You check all the deeds, you check all the property records, you check everything. You go to the engineer's office, you go to the county office, you go to the state, they run the EPA background check to make sure there's been no spills there, and they check that first. And then they say, we need to do phase two, because we found some stuff. And then you start pulling samples. Phase two requires you run under CERCLA all of these, which is technically, it's EPA 8260 and 8262. This is the organics and the inorganics. So the organic stuff is anything carbon chain, gasoline, ethyl benzene. 8262 is the inorganics, that's all the metals. You run it and you figure out what pops up. And then you talk about buying the property. Now companies all the time trade liability. We do this all the time. We did it at Marathon for years when we purchased Ashland. We traded environmental liability at our sites. We absorbed it for property. You can do that. It happens all the time, but there's a consent decree written into the document. Once you figure out what you got, you go back to the owner and say, there's only two things that are going to happen here. Either we're going to get the liability for a greatly reduced price, we're going to accept it because we've delineated it, we know how bad the pollution is, or we're going to set aside bonded money. It has to be bonded. Bonded money. We think it's going to cost $5 million to clean it up. You're going to bond this money and set it aside, and it's going to be on you. And you are going to clean it up. We'll develop the property, but you're going to pay to clean it up. That's the only two methods. There's other hybrids. We'll trade property. We can do all kinds of other stuff. But that's how the law works. That's it. And anybody that tells you different is lying to you. They're sitting at a desk and they've never worked in the real world. Anybody that tells you anything up here isn't correct is lying to you. They're trying to sell you something. Or it's a political document that was written to try to push through something. Never hang your hat on a political document, especially when your liability is on the line. So there you go, my friends. I did as easy, as simply as I could. I know this is hard to watch because it's complicated and it's confusing, but I hope it portrayed it to you in such a way.
Yeah. So how do we citizens pay for that cleanup?
Property
Is
taxes?
it taxes?
I don't know.
Bond?
I don't know.
Bond.
It
General
happened
fund?
in the,
I don't know.
General fund?
it happened in the state of Montana.
If we're gonna pay
Giant
for a
cleanup
bridge
there.
design and a park design from the general fund, I think we could pay for cleanup from our general fund.
Well, there's.
That's
where I get
cheaper,
my
that's
idea
cheaper than if we get sued by Aaron Brockovich because we poisoned the water and the people in Ottawa down the river are having birth defects. Like,
There is-
that's gonna go on our property taxes or our income taxes. We will pay for it because we're the ones who poisoned them.
There is
Or our
one-
city officials.
from. That's correct. There is one piece left, man. I'll take it.
So how are we gonna stop this? Because tomorrow
initiative.
night at council,
Yeah.
Flood
meeting's
council,
up.
flood the room, flood the zone, and call every council member.
It
holler
doesn't
at
do
them,
any good to
and
call
keep
council
calm.
people.
If you
We
get
have
enough
council-
people call them, they'll start listening.
We have councilmen in our area that doesn't do.
Sign the petition, circulate the
You have to sign
petition,
the
and when you
petition,
go
call
tomorrow
your
night to
CPA.
city council, take children.
If
They did
100
that for the school tax, right?
Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
children with you. Say, this is for, they're gonna be paying the taxes, they're gonna be paying for it, they're gonna be
Might
using
cover
it.
the health consequences.
Well, call EPA. You know, one call to EPA, they don't get excited about. 20 calls to EPA, they have to act on it. They don't have any choice. EPA will have to show up, and you call both. You call US EPA, you call regular EPA. But here's the point, we're not trying to stop flood mitigation. We're trying to do it responsibly. I don't care if they build a park, I really don't. Seriously, if that's where it ends up and somebody wants to put their name indelible on a bridge or whatever it is, so be it. If you're arrogant, if you're that arrogant, you know, and that's what you got to do to make your peace with whatever you worship, which appears to be money at this point for some of these people. If you want to do that, do it. I don't care, but you're going to do it right. That's wrong. Leaving that open to a park where children can play, absolutely. You go down there after a rainstorm, what's to prevent that stuff from being pushed back up? Absolutely nothing. There's no barrier. There's no nothing. They're just going to slam dirt on it, compacted clays, and put a screen on it to hold it in place. So do it right. Why can't we all just come together as a community? Why do they have to hate anybody that asks a question? Why? I don't understand that. Maybe my delivery's wrong, but yours isn't. I know my delivery. I know they hate me. They despise me because they're terrified. Because when you go in there and spout truth at them, they shut down. But you're a nice lady back there. Go to council and say, hey man, I'm just not comfortable with this. Please, just stop. Clean it up. How hard is that? But nobody ever does.
It would
There's
be
only
a lot cheaper than putting a $30 or $40 million park on top of toxic.
Well, think about what the lawsuit would look like. So you get one child that has one birth defect. You know what that's worth? EPA numbers? Talking 10, 15, $20 million all day long. Aaron Brockovich, the settlement was 900 million? No, it was the second biggest. It was 500 million. No, it was 900 million, and they negotiated it down to 500 million dollars.
You know
It's
the
the same
next one's
chemical.
gonna be bigger.
It's the same chemical.
We don't wanna be known for that. We don't wanna be like East
We're
Palestine.
going to try to draw businesses to Findlay. Why would we stand up on top of a podium and say, we cleaned it up. We're awesome. Look at us. Come live here. We did the right thing. No, what are we doing? Trying to build a monument to ourselves or something. I don't know, man.
So
Anyway,
they don't listen to us. So our only legal avenue right now is an initiative petition, which puts an ordinance on the ballot, and everybody in town gets to vote for it. So this ordinance inside this box is what I'm trying to get on the ballot. We need 1,400 signatures or so. So you can circulate a petition, you can sign a petition, but we need those signatures. And then if we get this on the ballot, we can all vote. And if you want the park, vote against this ordinance. You know, let them spend billions of dollars on whatever they want. But if you want them to be fiscally responsible and you want them to put it to a vote, then we need to get this ordinance right here on the ballot and we need to get it passed. It's the only thing we're going to listen to.
How long?
What is the date on the petition?
I believe August 4th is the 90 days before the general election. So we only have like 2 weeks to get the signatures we need.
How many do you have?
I have no idea. There's a lot of people
They
circulating.
have to be registered voters too, right?
Yeah, you have to be a registered voter to circulate, but you have to be registered in one of the Findlay 7 wards to sign.
because this is a city ordinance. ordinance. County is still able
Right,
to move
if I
forward.
had thought about it, I would have made it a county ordinance, and then we would have gotten everybody in the county on board, and it's not too late, anybody can do it. You know,
But
I
keep
only
in
did this
mind-
because nobody else is, and people are going to city council, and they're speaking, and city council sits there like deaf mutes, and they don't even engage with a single citizen, unless that citizen said, oh, the fireworks are so great, and then they'll talk for 20 minutes about how wonderful the fireworks are, and they'll go around the room and they'll pat everybody on the back about how wonderful they were at that thing. But anytime you bring any conflict, anything you don't agree with, immediately they all zip up, they turn off their microphones, and they don't engage. They won't even ask a question. It's sickening. They're representing us, and they won't talk to us when we come to the public forum and ask them questions. Like that's embarrassing. None of them deserve that seat at all. Not a single one of them. If they won't engage the public, they have no right being there. That's your job. That's your job. You're representing the people who are there to speak to you, and if you just sit there quietly,
Well, I'd like to think,
get up
I
and
also-
leave, resign.
I appreciate that too, and I love your passion.
I'm sorry.
I also would like, that's all right.
I'm just so
I also would like to
frustrated.
think that a lot of them don't understand their liability.
Right.
Because they're not being told that, because they're lying to them. They're saying, well, the VAP standard alleviates all your liability. That's not true. They're personally liable as well. All those city council folks are just as liable as you and I are, even more technically, because here's the other thing you don't know. There's such a thing under the US EPA, it would be out of Region 5, it would be federal US EPA, it's called Citizens Action Lawsuit. What it says is this: you don't have to show harm. You just have to know it's there. Because they take this so serious after things like Love Canal and the Cuyahoga River burning and 1,000 other properties. And it says you as private citizens can call up US EPA and say, man, they're not listening to us. We feel like our health is in danger. We want a lawsuit. And you get a free US EPA attorney to represent you in a lawsuit against. So it would be United States Environmental Protection Agency versus the city of Findlay and Greater Hancock County. I don't want to do that. I want to come to the table with everybody. Why can't we just sit and talk like adults? You don't like me, I don't like you, but we can agree to disagree on that part. I think they're just jealous because I'm so handsome, I'll say it.
That's what it is.
I think it's because I'm so
I think
pretty,
you're right,
let's be
Rob.
honest. But why can't they just come to the table? Why are they so
Because
hateful to
They
anybody
have
with
an
questions?
agenda. They are on an
Well,
agenda, and that's what.
I don't know, but I do know this, 500,
Radical. That
300 low-income housing unit project, that's a $300 or $400 million project all day. And anybody that tells you they're not going to do that's lying. We have the drawings, we have the stamp drawings, we have everything. We've had it since 2017. We have it. We've always had it, and we've called them on it. They keep saying, "Oh, we're not doing that." You know how big that project would be, and it's going to be right here. This is Clinton Court. This is 300 low-income housing units, right in the middle of downtown. With a park, toxic park right next to it, low-income children. Now, come on. You got to do the right thing. And by the way, I have property here. Full disclosure, I forgot to tell you that. I own a lot right in the middle of it. I bought it on purpose. Well, actually, myself and a bunch of investors who don't like what the city's doing bought a lot right there at auction. They have to go around our lot. They have to protect our lot from flooding and chemicals. By the way, we just got 6 more. All of these lots are ours. And we got 4 more that are coming up that are going to be under contract. Why? Because I put my money where my mouth is. I believe in what I'm doing. They don't. The guy that wrote the letter wouldn't even take liability. Wouldn't even touch it. Nope, I'm not doing that. No, nobody's going to do that, he said. So, we're trying. Some of us are trying, but you got to flood the zone, man. You got to get everybody you know, and you got to go to that council meeting. You got to.
Take children